1, 2. How you hear me? Okay. Okay. Um, Hello everyone. You probably met me yesterday, and I had a lot of feedback to talk about working remotely. So before I start, I want to ask you yourself a question: why actually you're interested in working remote, and what you plan to accomplish with starting to work remotely. And when you have a question, you will be able to ask it in Twitter. So just subscribe at me or at Evil Martians, and we will discuss it in the thread. So me or I or my colleagues will answer. So first of all, this talk will never exist if my colleagues would not encourage me, and especially the Paulina's story. Here is Paulina, and actually when she came to Evil Martians, she never wanted to work remotely, but she was so interested to work with the team, and she made a trade-off, and maybe which is why she actually faced with all the issues that maybe you could face when you start working remotely. And one day she had a call where she actually shared the pain with us. And first thing that actually different when you start working remotely is the communication. And the main thing is that you're starting to work in parallel. That means that actually you have no chance to find your colleague in the office and try to chat with him or with her. You never know when your colleague will answer, so you have to be in parallel. But the problem is that how you share the context when you couldn't chat with your colleagues. So we admitted delays, but the next thing that she discovered is that if you're able to postpone the response from your colleague, you have more time to research the problem, and sometimes you just have an answer in your arms. In other case, you could have much better research on the question, and in some cases you may see new requirements, and which is why we started in our team to write much more text and have much greater description of what we plan to do. The next thing was that when you start to work remote, actually things are different. Your environment is different. So actually, Paulina noticed that she started to work much more because previously when she worked from office, she mentioned when her colleagues started to go home. And when she was at home and she was not able to actually have some marker when to stop. And it, of course, led to some burnout. And that means that actually when we start to work remote, we have to think of what we have to control. We have to control everything. When we have to eat, when we have to start working, when we have to go off, and stuff like that. And the only way to deal with it is manage time. And managing time actually a pretty simple thing because you need only two concepts, the tasks and the priorities. The task is just something that you could track the time that you spent on it, and actually define whether it's complete or not. And the second thing is when you have a lot of tasks instead of your problems, you have to at first think which one to choose and then start it. And actually, I'll share on the last slide some techniques about the priorities, how you could define which task should be the first. And in the remote work, it is especially useful because you could prioritize not only the tasks from Jira. It could be when to go to the shop, or when you should go for a walk with your dog, or even when to go jogging. And then she noticed another thing, that when she started to work from home, her health started to feel worse because actually she understood that every day she was forced to go to office, so she had some work on the streets, going up and down the stairs, and when she started to work home, of course, no exercises. And this is only the first part. The other part is that actually, when you start to spend much more time with yourself, you have to you start to face with not only issues of your body, but issues with your mind, because things like socializing is again another task. So for body, I suggest you to always have some challenge. For example, from one of my colleagues, I had the challenge about having 15,000 steps a day. And then always have a rest. Just combine them and you will be okay. Another thing is about mind. It's a quite complex task, but complex topic. But the interesting moment is that our company significantly changed in the way we work when we hired a therapist as a part of the our insurance. And actually, you never understood why you procrastinate or just postpone some task, and sometimes you just go up and don't want to work and nothing forces you and it's hard. And most of the time the problem is inside you, in your mind. And I will suggest a book that maybe help you, and it's introductory, but it has some framework, the same as you have for the web applications. It just could be applied to your own life. And the second thing, what happens and what changes when you're not only working remotely, when you are not forced to go to office, but what happens when you start traveling? And there could be two cases, the long stay and the short stay. The long stay is the actually best way to travel and have a remote work, because you could actually prepare to most of the problems. And actually it's the same as the working remotely from away from office, but just with some preparation to lack of internet, lack of, I don't know, fixing your laptop or having another one in the back. But the second thing, what happens when you stay for 2 or 5 days in a city? In this case, I suggest you just to be agile. So by that I mean, again, as in extreme programming, have a small task for your journey. So for me, it's just taste the food, try to communicate a bit with local people, and just use it as a navigation to later have a long stay. And the last thing that I want you to keep in mind after that talk is that working remotely and working from office is just the something that I don't know, not force you to solve any particular problem. It's just about way you are able to to work. So one is when you have to focus on the tasks only, when tasks from Jira, and when you want to only do the business stuff, the working for office is the best case. But when you want to be in control of your life, when you want to understand what are your feelings, when you want to get a better understanding what your life is, the remote is the chance. So just thinking about having Linux or Mac OS. So in Linux you could do anything, but what amount of work you have to do. But in Mac OS you just have a tool that help you to achieve your goals, then that's it. The same thing about office and remote. Thank you, that's pretty much it. If you have questions, please find me on Twitter, then subscribe, and I'll share the tweets soon. And here's some self-help. It's just a link to a book that I suggest you to read. It's pretty nice framework for yourself to get better understanding of what you are and how to hear yourself. And the priorities is the link to the nice article where I listed, where not me, but some nice guy listed 9 ways to prioritize your tasks. And this is only part of the actual talk, and actually there will be an article released soon. So look at our blog, maybe you'll like it. Thank you.